women's erectile network is made up of the interconnected but separate structures of the clitoris, vestibular bulbs, and two sponges. The clitoris is composed of three parts: the head, the shaft, and the legs. The paired vestibular bulbs form fat parentheses around the vaginal opening, lying under the lips. The urethral sponge is the tubular cylinder of erectile tissue that surrounds the urethra and lies above the roof of the vagina. The perineal sponge is a pad of erectile tissue that sits under the vaginal floor, in the wall between the vaginal and anal canals. The inner labia also include some loosely distributed erectile tissue. The anal sphincter probably does as well. And erectile tissue isn't limited to your nether regions. Nipples and areolae are full of it, as their perky responsiveness demonstrates. We also have it in our lips, earlobes, and the flaring opening of our nostrils, the better to see, smell, and taste you with, as any bad wolf knows. The arousal arrangements. While all erectile tissue is essentially the same, the energy, arrangement, and responses of the female arousal apparatus are strikingly different from the male's. First, women can get aroused and be orgasmic with only part of the network activated. Unlike the all-or-nothing instrument of the penis, the female arousal network consists of many instruments. When one or two instruments are playing, the results are good, very good, sometimes. But women's arousal and orgasmic experiences depend on which areas of their network have been ignored or stimulated, so when the entire erectile orchestra is playing, the quality of the music rises to an entirely new and ecstatically enchanting level. This is no mere happenstance, the structures are connected at multiple levels and designed to play well together. It's one of Mother Nature's strategies for ensuring that reproduction is an activity women will want to do eagerly and often. Second, women's capacity for multiple orgasms appears to be related to the microscopic details of her erectile network. In women's erectile capillaries, even with orgasm, some valves open and others stay closed, meaning that some erection remains. While the path to female orgasm may be more elusive than the one for men to begin with, once it's discovered, the next step into multi-orgasmic capability is often an easy journey to make. Third, unlike men, women generally do not like having their erectile structures stimulated until they are already at least partly engorged. Premature stimulation is irritating and can actually decrease arousal. This is because yin sexual energy moves from the outside to the center. Yin arousal energy needs some time to accumulate in the genitals before direct contact is appreciated. This stands in stark contrast to how yang energy starts, right smack dab in the sex center. That's why core yang folk or anyone in a yang mood typically respond eagerly to direct genital stimulation at the onset of interactions, or as soon as possible. A single, complex, integrated system. Here's the straightforward and elegant reality. Women's sexual and reproductive structures and systems are one connected, coordinated, integrated arrangement. Sex, pregnancy, birth, orgasm, breastfeeding, bleeding, and not bleeding all participate in the same grand system. Science tends to break systems down into their components, in the process often overlooking the fact that the whole is much greater than the sum of the parts. It's an approach that has its virtues, but misses the forest for the trees. While the female sexual system does depend on the contributions of muscles, hormones, nerves, psyche, energy, neurochemistry, and more, it's not just a compilation of parts. It's a unified, brilliantly designed system, and we're missing something important if we don't see it in that light. The erectile circuits, the adjacent erectile structures create linked circuits. One ring surrounds the entrance of the vagina, connecting the side walls, floor, and roof. A second circuit is formed that includes the entire clitoris. The two circuits overlap and intertwine. Intertwining circuits. We'll begin by returning to women's erectile network, which includes the three-part clitoris, the vestibular bulbs, and the two sponges. These are not just separate, one-off ways to get off, they were designed to work together as a system. The erectile network forms two interwoven circuits. One forms the cuff around the vaginal opening, while the second overlaps the cuff and includes the whole clitoris. When both erectile circuits are engaged and engorged, stimulation and penetration feel marvelous. Without all the structures pleasured and puffed, insertion and thrusting are not nearly so arousing and may be downright uncomfortable. The transformation of the erectile network. When stimulated, the erectile network undergoes impressive changes as it becomes tumescent. Top, not engorged. Middle, medium arousal and engorgement. Bottom, fully engorged. Erectile expansion, the network at play. Let's take a closer look at what happens when the entire arousal orchestra is engaged. At high turn-on, the mind is in an altered state, utterly absorbed in the erotic experience. The body is awash with feel-good chemicals. Muscles tighten, the breath comes fast and deep, the heart pounds and senses focus on pleasure. Blood flow has dramatically increased to the erogenous areas. Nipples perk, lips swell, the nostrils flare and the pelvic region is flooded. Nerves snap to attention and electric energy buzzes through the sexual circuits. In the genital arena, the entire clitoris enlarges, becoming increasingly and exquisitely sensitive to the movement of the surrounding tissues, lips, mons, hood and the muscles on top and underneath. The vestibular bulbs go from being a small side note to a seriously swollen presence, pressing in on the vaginal orifice from either side. The vagina is both snugger and more expandable due to the erectile tissue's clever capacity to swell and stretch. The blooming vulva. The vulva blooms open like a fleshy, fertile flower. For many women, the head of the clitoris won't be visible, though yours may be, but for all women, it will be swollen whether or not it's hidden beneath its hood. The head and shaft widen, expanding the tent of tissue above them. Beneath their sheath of muscle, the clitoral legs also swell, interacting pleasurably with the interlacing muscles of the pelvic floor. The bulbocavernosus, the large sphincter muscle that encircles the vaginal orifice, is stretched and widened by the tumescent bulbs beneath. The transformation of the vulva, the enlargement of the erectile network visibly distends the entire vulva. Left, the vulva at rest. Right, the dramatic blooming of the vulva is evident with full engorgement of the entire erectile network. The outer labia are pushed open by the fattened bulbs, exposing more of the usually hidden intimate areas. The inner labia swell, darkening delightfully. The end of the urethral sponge is puffed, sitting just at the top of the vaginal opening, or perhaps a bit inside, to the point where the outer end is visible from the vestibule. You can see the raised circular cushion around the urethral opening. Any pussy penetration at this point will pull the outer pad of the urethral sponge along with it during in and out action. The inner orchestra. The same muscle that surrounds the vaginal orifice and covers the distended bulbs also provides the place of attachment for the round ligaments. As these ropey muscles contract, they tug the uterus forward and up. The perineal sponge in the anal vaginal wall expands, pressing into both canals. The roof of the vagina bulges dramatically down as the urethral sponge swells along its entire length. The increased circulation causes the walls of the pussy to sweat, producing their slick lubrication. The back of the vaginal vault is opened as the cervix is drawn upward, exposing the locations on either side in the back where the nerves bundles enter. As arousal energy builds, the tension mounts as the pussy puffs and circuits swell. Like a pumped-up blood pressure cuff, the genital cuff is inflated and squeezing snugly. When her erection is complete, the whole circuit of erectile expansion is evident. During orgasm, the orchestra pulses in a variety of rhythms, the muscles happily and quickly quivering, the clitoris pulsing, sponges squeezing and squirting, the uterus bopping up and down while the brain goes on holiday and the tide pounds in pleasure. Sex in the single clit is a good thing. Sex in the integrated erectile circuits, in other words, sex at the system level, is much better. And why stop there? Sex that integrates the four main aspects of our being. Body, mind, heart and spirit, is the best of all. Now that we've looked at the circuits on the physical level, let's take a look at the big evolutionary picture. Sex, fertility, and birth, one ecstatic system. Sukha Temple, Karang Pandan, Java. In humans, sex and reproduction, love and lust, and care and connection all overlap and interconnect. It makes evolutionary sense that this is so. While it's certainly possible to have unconnected, uncaring sex, we are definitely hardwired for connection. This is especially true for women, for whom sex is a high-risk activity. Female humans have limited reproductive opportunities, unlike males with their unending supply of sperm. Pregnancy and child rearing are activities that require an enormous amount of time and energy. Since it takes human babies many years to become independent, and since two can raise a family more easily than one, having sex with someone you are emotionally bonded to tends to be a successful reproductive strategy. There are not two separate systems, one for pleasure and one for reproduction. It's all one integrated, multi-purpose arrangement. As we've already discussed, there are hardwired physical, energetic and emotional circuits connecting the various erectile matrix components with each other, the uterus with the vaginal opening, and the breasts with the uterus. The sex and reproduction circuit, the impressive and powerful movements of the uterus during arousal and orgasm function to support and maximize fertility. A physical and energetic circuit runs from the vaginal opening in and along the canal, up through the uterus, up along the round ligaments, over the pubic bone and back to the vaginal opening. Our culture tends to see birth and sex as unrelated activities. Not that people don't understand that sex is what gets the baby started, but the subsequent processes, pregnancy, birth and breastfeeding, are generally seen as maternal, not sexual. This is a false dichotomy. The fact is that arousal and labor are very similar, and so are orgasm and birth. While it's true that sex is intensely pleasurable and birth is wildly intense and often intensely painful, both are consuming, extraordinary and powerful processes that are similar by evolutionary design, and not by coincidence. Sangha period, 1st century BCE. Sex and giving birth are not just two ends of a journey, they are the same journey, an intimately connected system that follows a primal evolutionary template. Evolutionary design conservatively uses the same equipment, energy and biochemical tides in both the sex and birth experiences. Both journeys also involve similarly altered states of consciousness, with the kindred trance states choreographed by the same chemistry. Oxytocin is a key player in the dance as it stimulates the contractions of labor, breastfeeding and orgasm. This so-called love hormone inspires attachment and mothering, be it to your beloved baby or your sweet soulmate. The falling in love hormone, phenylethylamine, or P, supports the magic of new baby bonding as well as the overwhelming passion of new lovers. Endorphins, our natural opiates, flood women whether they're in the throes of passion or labor. Dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, dubbed the God chemical, because of its association with transcendent experiences when used as a recreational drug, is released by the pineal gland in small bursts during regular orgasm, in sustained flow with expanded orgasm, and in labor, peaking at birth. Both the first stage of labor and the process of arousal are yin, they involve surrender, release and opening. Each requires a person to go with the flow, turn inwards and become entranced. Both orgasm and the decidedly more yang propulsive second part of labor involve adrenaline-mediated action. Also, either process can get derailed by the same antagonists, fear, anxiety and the inability to trust and to open. Yet another antagonist for both is stimulation of the analytical neocortical brain, which can cause either process to stall. Despite our generalized cultural anxiety, labor and birth have the potential to be powerful, transformative and even ecstatic experiences. Some women actually have orgasms during the birthing process. As a practical matter, it's useful to keep the parallels between sex and birth in mind. As a midwife with over 2 decades experience birthing babies, I can say with certainty that, to have the best possible birth experience, you should choose your birthplace the same way you'd select a place to make love, where you'll feel safe, private and undisturbed. Surround yourself with trustworthy allies and people who have faith in the innate wisdom of the natural birth process. Only when a woman feels secure can she open to the powerful tides of arousal or labor and release into orgasm, birth or ideally orgasmic birth in a flood tide of pleasure, wonder and love. L-U-C-A-G-I-O-R-D-A-N-O, Venus, Cupid and Mars. Breastfeeding is also part of women's sexual experience, as it's designed to be a pleasurable and even ecstatic love fest between the sacred and intertwined dyad of mama and baby. The hormones of in-loveness and bonding are there to help us survive the exhausting demands of parenting and ensure that we nurture our offspring instead of ignoring or abandoning them, as we'd surely do if we didn't love them madly. No one who has seen a baby sinking back satiated from the breast and falling asleep with flushed cheeks and a blissful smile can escape the reflection that this picture persists as a prototype of the expression of sexual satisfaction in later life. Sigmund Freud. All the aspects of the journey, cycles, fertility, pregnancy, arousal, orgasm, birth and breastfeeding, are part of the integral whole that is female sexuality. It is one of the tragedies of our culture that we've severed pregnancy, birth and breastfeeding from their messy, earthy, embodied sexual roots. To fully appreciate female sexuality, we must remember these connections, which hold true at a primordial level whether the woman in question chooses or is able to reproduce or not. Beyond that, we must also bear in mind that the integral nature of female sexuality does not begin and end with the body. The emotions are involved, too. There are not separate processes for love and lust. All these circuits are connected to and by your big old sexy brain. The magic of the menstrual moon, the waxing and waning cycle, L.U.I.S. R. Picardo, F. Valero, The Moon Nymph, 1896. Everyone, both men and women, can benefit from having a usable understanding of the female fertility cycle. If you want to know about the elaborately choreographed dance of the hormones, there are plenty of sources. Let's skip over that and look at the cycle from an energetic point of view. The physiological and psychological dynamics underlying women's menstrual cycle provide elegant insights into how sex, reproduction and the emotions are part of a single, integrated system. Women's fertility cycle used to be attuned to the moon's rhythm of 28 to 29 days. All women in a tribe or family who weren't pregnant or menopausal bled at the same time. In primal cultures, it continues to be the case that women bleed during the dark moon and ovulate at the full. Due to artificial lighting and other factors, most civilized women have lost that attunement. However, menstrual synchronization sometimes still occurs, as women who have lived together know. Like the moon, the monthly menstrual cycle waxes and then wanes. The first half of the cycle begins with the first day of bleeding, day 1, and extends through ovulation. This is the waxing part, much like the moon that gets bigger and brighter each night. Ovulation is the turning point. In primal cultures, which is to say in cultures unaffected by artificial technological interference, this occurs with the full moon. Women are likeliest to get pregnant when the moon is at its roundest. Once the full moon and ovulation are past, the second or waning half of the cycle begins and continues until the beginning of the next period. The first part of the cycle lasting from menses to egg is variable in length. It usually lasts between 12 and 16 days, although this can fluctuate wildly from woman to woman and for individual women, too. This is one of the reasons it's difficult to predict when a woman is fertile, since the timing of ovulation can vary considerably. The second part of the cycle, from ovulation until the next period, is fixed. It's almost always exactly 14 days for all women. The weekly weather report. To really understand the energetics of the fertility cycle, it is important to remember the evolutionary template is geared towards reproduction. We currently have the privilege of utilizing modern methods to prevent conception, so cycles and fertility can be turned towards things other than babies. Still, a woman's monthly journey has an emotional and erotic rhythm that is laid down by primal, universal reproductive impulses and operates independently of whether, as a modern, self-aware adult, she does or doesn't have or want to have a baby. Week 1. The bleeding time. During the first week of the cycle, which can be characterized as the bleeding time, the moon is shadowed and the night is very dark. 2. Bleeding means that you have not created a new life with your previous egg, and you, or rather that primal, born to breed part of you now release that hope. The blood flows, as do the emotions. Menstruation is a time of letting go, of releasing, of death preparing for rebirth. The energy is turned in, poised, quiet and insightful. There is an element of grieving as you release what hasn't worked and mourn the little deaths and losses of your life. You crave comfort and your tears may flow easily as you discharge and let loose. In traditional cultures, this was a time of deep, expansive spiritual work. All the bleeding women would gather in a special place and do ritual for the healing of the world, fertility of the earth, and planetary visioning. They would be exempt from their normal duties and responsibilities while they did the sacred journeying that only blood magic could catalyze. For modern women, the period of bleeding can be a great time to claim space for yourself or to follow the lead of primal people and gather with other women. Energetically, this is when it makes the most sense to take a break from serving and caring for others. It also lends itself to letting go of the old. This is when you can allow your flow to carry off with it everything you no longer need and release what no longer serves you. Week 2, waxing towards fullness. After your period ends, you move into the time of optimism and vigor. As the moon grows bigger and brighter each night, waxing towards full, subdue women. This is the upward and outward phase of the cycle as each day brings you closer to ovulation. Your vitality and energy levels increase, as does your libido. Your energy and vision are directed outwards. You are seeking that special spark of attraction, intuitively knowing the time is approaching when you can create new life regardless of your actual desire to make a baby. Lorenzo. Otto, Venus and Cupid, c. 1500. Week 2 is when women are most inclined to be social, outgoing and extroverted. Although humans have what's called occult or hidden ovulation, this doesn't keep women from sending, and men from receiving, a wide variety of subtle signals about breeding status. Scientific studies have established that Week 2 is when women are most likely to dress in sexy skimpy clothes, when they're most likely to be talked to and touched by men in casual settings, and when men find them most attractive. This is also a time of peak intelligence. For women and the time we do best on tests of all kinds. Week 2 is the period leading up to peak fertility on the actual day of egg release, though women can get pregnant for 5 days prior to ovulation. This is because, as we saw earlier, Week 2 is the period leading up to peak fertility on the actual day of egg release, though women can get pregnant for 5 days prior to ovulation. This is because, as we saw earlier, a woman's body can keep sperm alive for up to 5 days in sperm hotels, tiny glandular pockets just inside the cervix. During Week 2, the vagina is at its most robust. It is especially well lubricated and ready for action. The cervix adds a flow of slick and slippery stuff, charmingly called fertile mucus, that makes everything, and not just sperm, slide delightfully. Thus we have yet another example of our clever evolutionary design. We just happen to want to have sex the most, and are most apt to find a mate, during the time of the month when we're likeliest to make a baby. Libido peaks on the day of ovulation. Women project the energy of maximum fertility. We shine like the full moon, bright and glorious. Where do babies come from? Don't bother asking adults. They lie like pigs. However, diligent independent research and hours of playground consultation have yielded fruitful, if tentative, results. There are several theories. Near as we can figure out, it has something to do with acting ridiculous in the dark. Bongo, from Childhood is Hell, by Matt Groening. Week 3, the waning moon. The egg has come, provided a brief opportunity for conception and now, if unfertilized, passes. With the death of the egg, everything pivots and the energy that was going up and out starts heading down and in. Each new day is characterized by a waning of vitality and libido. Week 4, it's getting darker. Along with the shrinking moon, the energy continues to diminish. A woman's vision and thoughts turn inwards, often revealing issues that weren't evident in the first 3 weeks of the cycle. What is commonly thought of as bitchiness is really women looking at the deep issues in relationships in their lives with the intense gaze of the inner eye and questioning what isn't working. This is a fragile time for the vagina, and the rest of us, too. It's when we're likeliest to feel depressed, fatigued and uninterested in sex. Rather than go out, we would rather stay in and think, or brood, as the case may be. 3. It's also when women are most prone to get vaginal infections and other types of illness. This is a time to give yourself lots of self-love. It's also a time to honor this part of your cycle by creating a low-stress atmosphere of comfort and rest. Ideally, your intimate partners will be understanding of the special challenges this time of the month poses, and treat you with extra tenderness and love. Just because week 4 is when women are most likely to identify relationship issues and life challenges doesn't make it the best time to try to solve them. Taking action can overload an already burdened system. It is a time for gentle treatment, not bold action. As we go more deeply into week 4, the nights keep getting darker, until the relief and release of bleeding time blessedly arrives. And then this dance, this choreography of all that's primal blood and birth, desire and retreat, sex and death, this dance of a woman's most eternal qualities, this integral rhythm which is danced by the light of the moon, all begins again. Ancient Temple Vulva. Section 3. Becoming an erotic virtuoso.